Hi, fourth graders, it's Mr. Dinsmore. Today we're going to look at the partial products multiplication method, and our focus is going to be on 2-digit by 1-digit and 3-digit by 1-digit numbers. Partial products is a great method because it's really good for mental math, it's great for estimating and checking your answers in traditional, and it helps you understand place value as you move into the traditional method. The numbers we're going to be multiplying are 64 times 7. That's the first one we're going to do, and then we're going to do 827 times 4. Now, there's three key things you want to keep in mind as you do this method. One is that you're breaking the larger numbers like 64 and 827 into easier to use numbers that you can multiply. And once we do this, we're going to be multiplying to our hundreds, tens, and ones depending on if we have hundreds, right? And then once that's done, we're going to put those numbers back together. And one of the keys that you're going to see is when you're multiplying into hundreds and tens is that you're going to have to use extended facts and add zeros to those numbers to hold the place value. So let's get started. Remember those three keys. They are important. Okay, what I want you to do is take a piece of paper, eraser board, if you need to, pause the video, and write down 64 times 7. Now, I like to write it like this, the traditional way, and I recommend you do that because it makes it nicer when you move it into traditional. And it's also later on, when another method I'm going to show you makes it easier to line up your numbers to add them. So I recommend doing it this way. You don't have to. I see people that write it this way, which I will show you also, is where you write it out sideways. And it'll work either way. And if you're doing smaller numbers, you can just do it in your head, or the method in which you write it is not as important. But in larger numbers, you're going to see that the method on the left is a lot easier to keep track of your numbers. So what do we do? Okay, well, what we're going to do here is we're going to take that number 64, like in our method we talked about, and break it into an easier to use number. So we're going to break 64 into 60 plus 4. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to break it into 60 plus 4. And then now we're just going to multiply that 7 into those numbers, into 60 and 4. So you can see I put my 60 because my 6 is in the tens place, and I have 6 tens over on the left here, and then on the right I put the number 4, and now it's much easier to multiply that number 7 into those numbers. And it's the same thing on this side. It's just a different visual, and of course I'll be multiplying the 7 into those numbers. So let's go ahead and start multiplying our numbers, right? Remember we talked that we were going to be multiplying the 7 into the 60 and getting that answer. And then we're going to multiply into the 4, correct? And in this method here, it's the same thing. We're going to multiply the 7 into the 60 and then into the 4. And then once we have those answers, we're going to combine them for the total. Well, let's start. 7 times 6. Well, that's 42, isn't it? If I know that 7 times 6 is 42, I realize this is a 60. So I need to add a 0 for that place value of being in the tens. So my answer is going to be 420. And we've practiced added zeros when we've done extended facts. And that's why extended facts are important, because it's going to help you doing this method. Now that I've multiplied my 7 into my 60, I can do the same thing on this side, correct? And I'll get a 420. And then after I do that, all I have left is to multiply my 7 into my 4. And 7 times 4 is 28. So I write that here below. And on this side here, same thing. I am taking my 7 times 4, multiplying and getting 28. Now all I simply have to do is put those numbers back together, since I've multiplied the 7 into both the 60 and the 4, and I will get the answer. And what's nice about partial products is that you get numbers that are easy to work with. So now I can add these together, and I get 420 plus 28 is 448. And I'll have the same over on this one, because it's just a matter of how it looks. And then, of course, my answer, the product of 64 times 7, is 448. That is the double digit by single digit method. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the other method that I wanted to point out, which is an example of a triple digit by single digit. So if you want to erase your eraser board or get a different piece of paper, if you have room, you can write this one down. 827 times 4. Now I recommend that you guys write the number this way, and this method here, I'm going to show you why, because we're getting more numbers. It's just a lot easier. So, and then later on when I do the double and triple digit, you're definitely going to want to write it this way. And I'm going to write it this way, and then I'm also going to write it the same way on the right. Because believe it or not, with partial products, if you really understand place value, you do not have to decompose the number to get the answer. So I'm going to show you a method where you, as long as you know what the numbers are and you decompose it in your head, you do not have to write them out and you can still solve for the answer. So I'm going to show you both ways, because if you're strong with place value, you'll probably want to start doing the way that I'm going to show you on the right. Well, on the left here, we know that we have to break 827 into its place values, right? So that's the big number we have to break apart. So we have 800 plus 20 plus 7. And then, of course, we're going to be multiplying those numbers by 4. So there it is. There's our 800 now, because we have a hundreds place, and then we have our 20 and our 7. Now, if you look over on the right, I didn't break it because what I'm going to simply do is just multiply that 4 to the 800, then to the 20, and then the 7. And just keep in mind that I'm multiplying to an 800, a 20, and a 7, and I should be okay if I take that place value into account. Well, let's get started. Well, let's start with the 800. So 4 times 8 is 32. It's an extended fact, so I add those 2 zeros to count that it's 800, and I get the answer 3,200. After I've done that, now I'm going to multiply my 4 into my 20. But let's go over to the other problem for next door and say, what if I just said 4 times 800 here? I don't need to break the number apart. So all I have to do is write that 3,200 underneath the number as if I was solving it traditionally. And so now I have 3,200. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is multiply the 4 to the 20. And 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 0 is 80, because I'm accounting for the tens place. And then I do the same thing over here. I just, instead of saying 4 times 2, I know that's a 20, so I have to put a 0. And I'm just keeping that place value in mind, and I write that 80 underneath on this side. And then, of course, 7 times 4, that's my ones, and I'm going to get 28. And the same thing over here. I just go 4 times 7, and I get 28. And you can see that I multiplied the number to all 3 digits, which were broken into their place values on the left, but not broken into their place values on the right. But I just kept in mind that that digit 8 is 800, and that digit 2 is 20, and the digit 7 is a 1, and treating them accordingly. And since I have 3 numbers here that I'm adding together, I know I did it correctly. So now let's add them together. And you can see that when you add these numbers together, 80 plus 28 is going to give me 108 that I add to that 3,200, and you can see I'm going to have the answer 3,308. Now, the nice thing about this method on the right is the numbers are lined up vertically, which is a lot easier for a lot of us to add that way because those place values are lined up, and you can clearly see even how you would regroup that 8 and 2 and carry that 1, and you get that 3,300. So it's a nice visual of how you get the answer here. And you can see I didn't have to write as much to do the one on the right. But I highly recommend you do the left method until you're really comfortable with identifying place value. So our product for this method of 827 times 4 is 3,308. Now this is an example of partial products. You can use whatever layout that you prefer when you're writing your numbers, but I highly recommend that you try to get to the skill level where you do not have to decompose the numbers. But until you're there and until you really understand place value, use the method on the left where the numbers are broken apart to make sure that you're handling place value correctly. I hope this was helpful. Bye.